Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Dexter New Blood, Episode 8. So, I know people had probably seen this review. They have already seen this. They know certain mistakes that I had made. I will admit that. Here's always the thing. There are certain reviews that eventually I realize how bad of a mistake that I made. There's sometimes where names just slip my mind. There's sometimes where details just slip my mind also. But it doesn't happen all that often, but every once in a while, eventually it deems me to realize it's like, well, normally in the next episode I would possibly have a rebuttal, but that's like almost a week away. And so, like, plus this season is going to be ending soon anyways. So, and it's just the fact of this review being like the biggest viewed review that I have gone on to do. So, like, I could easily take it down and lose all the views from it, but I think it's the right thing to do. Like, it's not all about the views. It's not all about. It's just like realizing I had made a mistake, because that happens. Normally, I would have like a cast list right in front of me. Normally, I would have even cliff notes sometimes of certain episodes and go into heavily detailed and going into dialogue or going into whole stretches of everything. But yeah, so my bad. There are some times where I've seen in videos where I had mispronounced a name, and like that is the one thing that people will remember besides any other part of the review, how challenging or complicated or complex it was. And that's okay. Like, I am okay with that. Because really, like, I had gone on to save certain videos that are just still up there that I rebutted in the very next video and just said, well, yeah, I realized that this was a mistake. I realized now looking back on it how I misjudged something. But here's why we are here now. So I have that long stretch of thing, but I just wanted to just like hopefully no harsh whatever feelings about a mistake. So with that said, let's go into this episode. So we have Caldwell and we have Harrison who are bonding in this episode. I say Caldwell just because I had forgotten that Kurt was to be called Kurt. So Caldwell seems to be the easiest thing for me to much more remember because I'm still going off of memorization. So Caldwell and Harrison are bonding within this episode again. We have Angela who is going much more in depth about Dexter's possible attempted murders or possible murders. It seems that Angela is going into a deep dive because Logan is to come on in and is to have Angela get very much more suspicious of Dexter if she already was suspicious because of Molly talking to her the episode prior. We also have Dexter here who is to have gone on and been abducted by a guy named Elric who is to go on and try to choke Dexter from behind, dragging him into a vehicle of sorts to then try and take him out into the woods and murder him with this sniper rifle. And Dexter is to eventually escape from this, go and smack Elric with this branch, tree, whatever, to then give him a kind of Joker-like smile. So that way I can get that out of the way, so I can kind of get into the much more quicker parts of that story. Really having us also in our minds trying to figure out what certain visual things are going on here in this episode. There are some parts where I'm thinking here, is this all in Dexter's mind? Is this a real thing happening? Is Dexter just kind of losing his mind here? Is there something... is Dexter's mind playing tricks on him? What's really going on behind all of this? Because there's a certain image here where Harrison is to go off on certain people in this episode. And I'm like, okay, so is that all in Dexter's head? Because there has been plenty of times before at some point where Dexter has gone on and had Deb go and have this like whole like birthday party parade thing for Dexter. And we have had several times where Dexter has gone on and had a very well in-depth imagination at some points or another. Hence why he has Harry that is to guide him through a number of scenarios and things throughout past seasons. So, with that said, let's go out of our way to go into spoilers of this. Hopefully I didn't give too much away. There was stuff that I just wanted to get out of the way and cover. If anything, there is probably to be one thing that I probably did forget about from the first iteration of this, is probably the drug name that is to be used at the end of this episode. So if I get it incorrectly, I do apologize. Like more than likely, I will just call it a injectable drug or something like that, because I probably had remembered what it was. I think it was like tryptophan or something like, or like it starts with a T. So more than likely, I'll just call it an injectable drug, just that we can get this kind of seemingly in detail, but not in 100% name detail. But anyways, let's go on. Let me pause here for 1 second. Ketamine. Ketamine. That is the syringed drug that I couldn't figure out the name of. So I wanted to go back and kind of Google search it. And so that is the actual name, because I knew I was going to get that still incorrect because it's a drug. Anyways, so let's go into this. Hopefully I can get everything right. So let's go out of our way to go into the Caldwell Harrison story, because that seems to be the much more detailed thing. And then I will go out of my way to go into the Dexter stuff. We'll go into the Angela stuff. And then we will go out of our way to wrap this up and call it a day. So let's go into that double 5 time territory, because it's about that time again to go into spoilers about this one. So spoiler time, it's about that time to get to spoil this episode. So in the Harrison and Caldwell story, we have at one point that Dexter is having this, I'm assuming maybe because of blood loss, maybe because any number of things, but Dexter is having this imaginative dream of sorts, possibly, or hallucination, that we have Harrison that is going through with this switchblade of his, or his blade, and going through and carving up that other wrestling team that, of course, are to have these leather jackets and are to go on and try to be very intimidating to Harrison, while in the last episode we kind of resolved all that with Harrison kind of cutting through some of those guys, and then when Dexter comes in, these guys are to eventually just kind of run off. But we have still kind of Dexter in the back of his mind thinking that there might be something resolved there. And with Dexter not being there for Harrison. Maybe this is going to be the one window of time where Harrison goes through and starts slicing and dicing through people, because Harrison had gone on in the last episode to say that he is to have these dark, violent thoughts. And so now Dexter is going to figure out a way to now really want to tell Harrison the truth here towards the end of this episode, which I really can enjoy here. But I'm going to cover the Caldwell Harrison story here. I just wanted to kind of leave that there to just be like, was that, like, we would have to assume that was some kind of just Dexter's imagination playing with him, as we also end up having Deb telling Dexter, it's like, well, hey, like, Harrison's blood is going to be on your hands, knowing all good and well that Dexter has really poked the bear of Kurt, and that will bleed into Harrison dying here. So Kurt and Harrison. We have Harrison, who is walking on into town to all of a sudden see Audrey and Zach putting a tree on, I'm assuming, Audrey's car. And so we have Harrison going on and looking at this and possibly thinking that Audrey has now moved on to another suitor, another guy. So he is otherwise wanting to walk a opposite direction, and is to all of a sudden get called by Caldwell to say, like, well, hey, like, do you want to, like, spend some time together? Like, we can kind of do some bonding and so on and so forth. Because it seems that Harrison really isn't all that busy. And so Kurt is like, well, hey, like, I'll go and I'll pick you up, and we can go to some batting cages and just kind of have some fun, yada, yada, yada. I'm hugely paraphrasing here. So we go on and we have both Caldwell and Harrison, who are making their way to this school. And so the immediate thought process is, how is it that Caldwell can get into this school? But we actually have this thing explained to us, and I'm like, you know what? I like this show for going out of its way to explaining things, because they could have just wrote it off as some kind of something here. But they, like, it could have been like, oh yeah, I just borrow the keys from Logan and like, I can come in here. Here's the one thing, though. In my thought process of this school, shouldn't this school probably have an alarm of sorts that goes off if anybody is to kind of go into this school out of business hours? Or is this kind of a regular like thing for people to just come in willy-nilly whenever they want to? You would think if that would be the thing, maybe like certain people would go on and maybe have to like make a call pre-head of time. But also, when looking at it, there's several sports that kind of go on like at any point in time. So I can possibly understand if maybe there isn't like an alarm system going on here for anybody to just make their way into the school. But I'm taking too much time for this. So Caldwell and Harrison are going into this pre-set up batting cage that is really just netted up and has this kind of ball machine just kind of blasting away. And immediately when I look at this, I'm seeing the fact that it's winter time and we have this set up, and I wouldn't have thought that this would actually be a thing that would be pre-set up in a gym. Like, that just kind of bugs me, that, like, why would this school be wasting away a gym to have this kind of setup? Because it's for the show. It's really just for the show. So we have Caldwell going on and batting away, and he, of course, is to mention that he is, of course, on the softball team. and so that's why he can kind of hit pretty well here. And so we get Kurt some pretty good smacks, and Harrison is just kind of uh, like being like, yeah, like, man, what a good hit, what a good slug. And so Harrison is now going up, and he's just having troubles at bat because we find out that Harrison, even though he had technically through foster home be taught a lot of things, I guess baseball just wasn't one of them. Because we have Harrison, who's kind of like a blank slate like person, where he has to be retaught a lot of things, and I mean a lot, because like only foster homes would have only certain kind of things. And I kind of like here that we had Harrison before, like saying that he was taught certain things, but then once we get to this one element here, it's like we're not reusing that whole like, oh, I was taught how to bat in a foster home. No, we really have it where Caldwell is like showing him how to like twist his wrists. And like, I know for me, when I went into baseball finally, I kind of had to be taught how to like swing and how to like catch a ball and stuff like that, just because I just wanted to just go into some sport. And then I realized I was like, oh, okay, there's something that I can pick up here. There's something technique wise where I could learn. And I kind of thought that was fascinating, even though I probably would have not really been good at what I was doing. Like, it was just like, hey, this is something to pick up for later or have for later, a technique of sorts to learn. So Harrison is starting to get these balls, and he is starting to miss them. Caldwell teaches him how to like swing the bat, kind of flick the wrists and all that kind of stuff. So Harrison goes on to start hitting the ball and hitting it pretty decently well. And so Harrison all of a sudden is to now have Caldwell set up this machine for a curveball. And you would think after the first curveball, we'd have Caldwell who's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, maybe, like, maybe this is just something that, like we won't do. Maybe that was a little tough or whatever. But no, like, Caldwell just like does his curveball and it smacks right into Harrison's freaking chest. And by the end of this kind of session, we just see the welts that are, of course, on Harrison's six-packed ribs, because I'm sure he had to work out very heavily, uh, especially when you get like a shirtless scene. Because there's a lot of times when guys are to say like, "Hey, if I'm ever to be shirtless, let me know ahead of time." So, because there's a difference between looking good on camera when so there's a difference between looking good on camera when you're just having a shirt on, and there's looking good on camera when like you want to take your shirt off at some point. So good on Harrison for just kind of like maybe that was just a, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. So, but like, hey, like freaking shirtless guys, it's a challenging thing of everyday life. Whatever. Anyways, so Harrison continues to get pelted with these balls, these curveballs, just time and time again, and so Caldwell is just continuing to just let this happen, and Harrison is just even like uh, crowding the plate even more and more to just get hit with these balls. And while Harrison is getting hit with these balls, he's remembering flashbacks of things and remembering things that he had possibly done and possibly hurt people and so on and so forth. So we have Kurt finally, after a number of balls that this kid has gotten hit by. Caldwell is like, well, okay, I think we're kind of done for the day. Like, you're a really tough kid. Like, I was just waiting for one of these balls to get like smacking Harrison in the freaking head and like knocking him unconscious, and that's where Caldwell is to come in and like grab this kid and like drag him off, and then murder him in the only way of which that he knows how to, because Caldwell was talking to Elric while Elric was having Dexter in the back of his vehicle. And so Kurt was going on and saying, well, hey, like, if you take care of Jim, I'll take care of Harrison. So we really have a foreshadowing thing here that something is going to come for Harrison against Kurt. But like immediately I was thinking, like, is there going to be some other way that he's going to go after Harrison this time around? We're going to be like surprised that Harrison had been poisoned or some other kind of means instead of just still this same old ski mask chasing off like scene going on here. And so like there's certain things that I kind of have to cover from the Dexter story to this, and it's not all still in perfect array. But I just want to cover certain stories and then get into other things. So we have Caldwell that is talking to Harrison and mentioning, it's like, well, hey, like, would you like some venison? I have some venison at my home. And like, have you ever tried venison? And of course, Harrison is like, no, I haven't had venison before, which is basically just deer meat. And so Kurt is like, well, how is it that you haven't had venison? Like, your father should have probably like given you that, because it seems to, I guess maybe that's the go-to meal for this area. So we transition both Caldwell and Harrison to make their way to Caldwell's place. And so let's put a pin in this because we're starting to get to the points where the Dexter story is to eventually to be tied with this Harrison story. So let's go on and cover the Dexter stuff. So Dexter, of course, as we are to really just first see him in this episode, is to be zip tied in the back of some, I want to say SUV, but like I could be wrong about that. So Dexter is being zip tied pretty well, and he's trying to break these ties. He, of course, is to have some kind of little device in his shoe, I guess, to realize that at some point he's probably going to get zip tied and taken or whichever, because with Dexter, that seems to be like a normal, consistent thing of occurrence. So Elric, while making his way to these woods, is going on and getting calls from Caldwell. And so what ends up happening here is, of course, Dexter is to eventually go and get out of his zip ties and to cause an accident, which then is to now have Dexter get free of this vehicle and is starting to be chased out in the woods with Elric slowly but surely behind him, because of course he had kind of gone on and been in a car accident technically. So Elric is to go on and have this sniper rifle of sorts. And as I would have said via the previous thing, like, I didn't realize this before, but now when I was scrolling through IMDb at some point, kind of looking at pictures of Elric, I realized that this guy was actually, Elric was the Frankenstein from Van Helsing. And, like, again, in my mind, I was thinking, like, how is it that this guy is so massively tall in that movie compared to here, where it seems, maybe it's just, like, because Dexter is possibly so tall, and probably Elric probably is a tall, massive guy. It just doesn't look that way. It doesn't come off that way in this camera. that they are to shoot this show, because like looking at him in Van Helsing, he was this big, massive guy. Um, so Elric is to go on and get his sniper rifle, and Dexter's realizing that he's like, oh shit, like, oh my god, Dexter is overwhelmed here by the in-depth weaponry that Elric is to have. Elric goes on and shoots Dexter, and so Dexter is desperately running into these woods. And we have Dexter, who is taking a bandana and to tie it onto his leg. And we have Dexter going on and saying, like, that the only person that he that or the only thing that he hates is when like he himself is bleeding. Like if someone else is bleeding, that's fine, but when he's bleeding, he just hates it. Like I'm kind of paraphrasing here. So, anyways, we have Dexter going further on into these woods, and so Deb again is to kind of be there for a slim second, but then just kind of fading off. Not really helping Dexter at all in this scenario. You would have thought it would have been cool if Deborah would have just been like maybe doing some kind of guidance or some kind of something, just to have her more in this episode. I kind of like the dialogue exchange between both Dexter and Deb, but I also am like, but look at all the other episodes, like Deb having to be in that like ice water and she like jumps out of it. And I'm like, good God, like Deb has done some very difficult things in this show. Bravo to the girl who plays Deborah in the show. How many challenging and difficult things that she has technically done. When her part, yeah, is a very small part compared to everything else. So we go on and we have Dexter, who is to make his way through this forest. And we have, of course, Elric that is to intimidate Dexter, as basically he is still a earshot away from Dexter. Kind of having this kind of like, I can do this all day kind of thing. And toward Dexter is like, well, yeah, like you can take the day, because at night, like I'm going to become like the predator and you're going to become the prey. So Dexter is to make his way to this one lake, where he is to realize that someone could easily like see where he's going. They can see his tracks obviously in the snow. Like a 10-year-old could go and find where Dexter is. So Dexter goes on and is to kind of backpedal with his tracks and kind of wait for Elric to make a pass here, so then Dexter could go on a different route. So Dexter goes on to make it to this sign where it is to say a summer camp, and he's like, like this is a place where I can kind of make my stand and go off and try to take this guy down, simply because like it's not a wide open space. And like a sniper rifle, like what good does a sniper rifle do? Because it's a much more long range like weapon. So Dexter goes on to this summer camp and is to go on and find this one kitchen knife, like a Michael Myers kind of style of knife that we've seen in almost every horror movie that we ever seen in our life. But this spot here is to be kind of very much reminiscent of like Friday the 13th. And like that was kind of like, if only we could have Dexter kind of in a much more themed like environment, like per every episode. Like that would be cool every once in a while, to have like this horror kind of throwback a little bit, where all of a sudden we're seeing like certain kind of variations of familiar territories of possibly horror films in this show. But Like, I think that would be a little bit too much to have to, like, come up with a story every single time to fit that kind of thing. And it'll just come off as trying too hard, or it'll come off as just, like, trying to be nostalgic for something, and it's not trying to be its own show. So, Elric makes his way to this summer camp following Dexter because now there is a trail of breadcrumbs, or in this case, a trail of blood. So Elric goes on and is to follow this trail of blood that Dexter is to leave here, as he's basically to purposely drain some blood off. And so I'm kind of wondering or concerned, like, how much of blood loss will Dexter have had by the end of this episode, and hopefully he's going to go to the hospital after this episode is to, of course, be over. So Elric is to go through this summer camp following the trail of blood crumbs, and so Elric is to spot that one of the knives has gone missing, and he's like, you brought a knife to a gunfight. I'm like, there have been plenty of causes, or plenty of times, I should say, where bringing a knife to a gunfight is still always a good thing. Like, look at the Punisher movie, where we have, of course, the guy who is doing the one guitar thing where he's like, I'm going to play this at your funeral. And we go on and we have this car chase that leads to having this this hairy guy, I think because that's his name, going on and holding a gun to the Punisher and like, you stupid, you brought a knife to a gunfight, because this guy just has this, like, kind of like this knife. And so all of a sudden the knife becomes a projectile and goes into this guy's jugular, killing him off. And it's like, well, like, that's one of the cases where, like, bringing a knife to a gunfight was still a good thing, because there's always a strategy that, of course, some people can have because they're well trained. So Elric goes on and is to make his way through this summer camp to eventually look at some mirror that is to have this kind of quote on it. So all of a sudden, Elric is looking at this mirror to have Dexter come crashing through it, fall on top of him, and Dexter is to now have a blade to this guy's throat. And Elric is like, who are you? Who are you? And so Dexter, in my mind, should have just said, I'm Batman, because technically, I had mentioned this before, but Gods and Monsters is a animated movie where Dexter did actually, Michael C. Hall did play Batman in that animated movie. So technically he can say that, he can have that kind of quote of things, because technically he was Batman at one point. Not Bruce Wayne Batman, but Man-Bat Batman. So yeah, go ahead and check that out so you guys can be aware of that. Not trying to say go and watch that video. I'm just saying, hey, there's a thing. So, and plus he's a vampire in that, so it's kind of interesting. So we go on, we have Dexter go through and stab this guy in the chest. And so we have Dexter going on and quickly taking Elric's clothes, his hat, his coat, because really he also needs to get warm here also. So might as well just take all of this guy's clothes. But he's also doing this so he can be under disguise when Dexter is to make his way back to Harrison, knowing good and well that Dexter is hoping that he can get to Harrison before Kurt gets to him. So Dexter does not have his phone on him, and so now he's going and stealing Elric's phone and is texting Harrison to say, like, hey, it's your dad, like, run away from Caldwell, like, he's dangerous, so on and so forth. There's a lot of texts going on, and so Harrison is now with Caldwell, just kind of waiting for that venison. And so Caldwell is giving Harrison this alcohol, and considering Caldwell like knows good and well that Harrison had probably gone on and partied, had probably gone on to overdose on drugs and all kinds of things. Like Caldwell knows good and well. It's like, well, you've probably had a beer or two, so here you go. Here's this beer, or here's this like alcoholic beverage of sorts. And so Harrison is to go on and sip this or drink this alcohol to realize that it tastes like a Band-Aid. So we have Caldwell and we have Harrison who eventually go on and have this heart to heart, because Harrison is getting texts from a person he thinks is his father, and but he's not sure. It's just some random like number. It's that is convincing him that he is Dexter. He is his dad. So at first, we have Harrison who doesn't know who that is, so he just goes and puts his phone back in his pocket and just turns it off. I think he ends up hitting the Bluetooth button on it, which I don't know like why he was to do that. Maybe he put it on silent mode. But to me, it looked like the Bluetooth button that he hit there. But Harrison put this back in his pocket and just wanted to really talk with Caldwell. But we kind of have Harrison, I think, in his mind, kind of realizing that maybe there is some truth to what this random person is telling him about Caldwell here. Because when Harrison is to ask Caldwell, like, well, hey, like, why were you in prison? And so Caldwell was mentioning, well, my father had gone on and murdered a girl some time ago, and because I was to share his same DNA, I, of course, was arrested, but it was all a misunderstanding, and so I ended up getting, like, set free because there was no real evidence tying to Caldwell in that case. And plus, also, Caldwell having that story just kind of cleared his name. Because it sounded like a very convincing, like, story. So we have Caldwell talking about his dad here, and so that all of a sudden has Harrison starting to want to open up about his dad. How when Harrison was to go on and make his way to hope he can like find a dad, because he found a letter that was kind of hidden away from him. And Harrison, I think, was wanting to go and figure out and find Dexter to, one, try to get answers, but Harrison wanted to really come here to find a connection. And I just seen Iron Man 3 lately, so immediately when he said that, I was like, because we're connected? That's what kind of popped in my brain when I was watching this whole scene being played out. And so we, of course, had Harrison here, because it's a tender moment, but I'm also making a joke about it. But we had Harrison who wanted to come here to eventually get what he is going to get at the end of this episode. Because Harrison is like, well, like, he was so lost, and he, like, was just hoping that there was a reason why Dexter had left, was probably because Dexter was just like Harrison, and that's the real, like, connection, is what I think is what Harrison is really saying here, that his violent tendencies and him possibly wanting to hurt people, maybe he had inherited that. So, kind of like they go on, and the therapist in one episode before is talking about inheriting abandonment. So, we of course have at one point where Harrison is going off to get some logs, and so Harrison decides after that whole connecting thing that he decides to go on and put back on his phone to realize there has been a massive number of missed calls coming from this one person. And so Harrison at first is kind of texting like, what the fuck? And so all of a sudden Caldwell is to come quickly out here to be like, hey, like, what's going on? Like you're out here for a while and not really out here all that long. I think Caldwell is really here in this moment trying to keep Harrison here and keep his attention on this moment instead of having him have some kind of excuse for leaving here. And so I think that's what's really going on. So when Caldwell is kind of poking outside to just kind of realize that Harrison is possibly getting distracted with his phone, that's when Caldwell just kind of run out there just like maybe he's texting somebody and I want him to just kind of like stay here. We have Caldwell that is going on and saying like, well, hey, like I can give you a ride back home or whatever you like. And Harrison is just feeling obligated to continue to stay here because he's like, oh no, like I really want to try that venison. It's like, well, yeah, that's like, yeah. So we have Harrison going and is to not answer the text and just to kind of like see where this further heads. But I think Harrison is also to be prepared. Whether he has to like eventually come up with some kind of fighting skill that he has learned over time, or to possibly come out swinging with something, or which is either a fist or whatever. So Harrison goes back into this this little shack, this little cabin, this little place, and so Caldwell is to all of a sudden come back with this ski mask on and his kind of camo gear, and he's like, all right, like it's time for you to go on and run off so I can murder you. Like we have it where Caldwell is thinking that Elric had covered Dexter and had killed him because Dexter had texted Caldwell that everything is taken care of, and I'm kind of leaving the Angela stuff to the very end here. So Caldwell goes on and tells Harrison to run. All of a sudden, we have supposedly Elric making his way back, kind of honking his horn, and Caldwell's like, well, yeah, just come on, yeah, just come. And so the more and more we just continue to see Elric just honking this horn, really for Dexter to distract Caldwell here and want Caldwell more focused on Dexter than on Harrison. But then when this car comes closer and closer to Caldwell realizes that he's outnumbered here, and so he kind of drops his gun and runs off. And so now Dexter is to make his way to his son, hug him, and is to say, hey, are you all right? Are you okay? And so, like, Harrison doesn't give a about his head. Like, hey, you bleeding out there? What the? So, Dexter and Harrison are going into this car, and so Dexter is to finally tell Harrison the truth here. How Dexter, like Harrison, was born in blood, and that Dexter is now going to go on and teach Harry's code to Harrison and tell him everything because he should have done this all along, but like now he figures that it's the right time to do this, to go about this. And Harrison just goes on and hugs Dexter, and Dexter is like, like this is so nice, and like maybe it's something that he needs, and it's maybe also something that I need. And so that kind of wraps up that story, as I didn't go into the meat and potatoes of everything, but like it's really interesting to see where this story is going to go now, with Dexter needing to now do these episodes of training Harrison to basically become him, because we've had several of those times before in other episodes where we've had like Harry go on and get some kind of drink or something in the middle of the night and open up his refrigerator for Dexter to be coming and jumping on him, kind of choke him out, and then Harrison is kind of like tap out, and then Dexter's like, yeah, I got you, and Harry's like, don't be happy about that. Like, yeah, you got me, good for you, but like don't like boast about it, don't be glad about it, like I'm trying to keep you safe kind of thing. And so we'll kind of see where Dexter might become Harry in a lot of these scenarios. And like, even if we kind of see the copying and pasting of every single thing that Harry had taught Dexter in the Dexter show, I will be happy about that, elated about that. So let's go on, let's cover the Angela stuff so we can wrap this up, because I know how long this episode was, and I'm realizing that we're kind of getting to the end of that episode. So Angela goes on and is, of course, talking to Logan. Logan, because now Dexter and Angela are technically broken up here, Logan is to go on and mention about the whole Miles situation, where Logan was to go on and get the call for that Harrison OD, and that Logan had gone on to try to arrest the guy who had the drugs, to eventually go and find the actual drug dealer, and Dexter was right there going on and punching this guy and beating the crap out of him. And so Logan had gone on and arrested Dexter, but it only like kept him overnight to kind of just have him kind of cool off and kind of learn his lesson to like, hey, like I can't just like I can't just have somebody just going and finding some drug dealer on their own and beating them up. So Angela is thinking, wow, this story is really interesting, so maybe I want to go on and further like go into this, like understand what's really to have happened for this story. So Angela goes to this bar and is to confront Miles into this bathroom, and she's to arrest him, but then she's like, hey, like I only want your story, I don't want to really arrest you here, I just want your story of what you had thought through that part of time had happened. So Miles is going on mentioning that he was to have this guy seemingly interested in his drug-like product, to then turn around and have this guy go and just start wailing on him and beating the crap of him. But Miles is to mention that weirdly he was to like feel somehow in the back of his neck that this guy was getting syringed, and there's still the mark present on his neck for this girl to go and take a picture of it and just be like, well, like, the thing about Angela is she's just kind of mistrusting of a druggie to like, because any number of druggies could just have syringes and whatever, because you have like guys that are kind of tied together, and so if they coincidentally have the same mark, maybe they just took the same drugs. So we have Angela going on to like kind of rebrief or whatever with Logan, just kind of going and just kind of asking Logan more about like this story and this case. So Logan also is to go on and mention a guy named Jasper, who was to actually be the distributor for these drugs, and so we have, of course, Logan mentioning that once they were to arrive to make it to Jasper, he had already OD'd off of some coke. And so Angela's like, well, that's weird. Was he tipped off by somebody? Was maybe Miles tipping him off to, and so he didn't want to be confronted by this whole thing. He didn't want to go to jail. He didn't want to whatever. So Angela goes on and is to now find the body of Jasper. And so Jasper is to have that same needle mark into his neck. And so now Angela is starting to put things together. And so it seems that this kind of coroner or this mortician or this guy who had done this autopsy has gone on to mention, I guess, there was a drug laced into this guy's system. But with druggies, like, you don't really have any real, like, you don't second guess, like, what these guys had done. You just kind of mark down, like, okay, there was these things in their system because of the screening of kind of, like, what was in their system during that time. So Angela is to go on and do some studying, and she goes on and is to find out about the Bay Harbor Butcher case that is to have the same ketamine homicide thing going on. And so we end up having the pictures of all of the hefty bagged bodies that are down into the waters that, of course, Dexter had dropped so many years ago. And like, I'm not quite sure exactly which season it was still that they had gone on to the Bay Harbor Butcher case. I'm assuming it's probably got to be season 3, if I'm correct, right? Because I know at the tail end of possibly episode 2, or season 2, I mean, they kind of cliffhanged it. And then in season 3, I think Dexter was going on and going into a like a drug meeting of sorts where he was going and getting this sponsor, and this sponsor, he eventually ended up getting into a romantic relationship with her, which led to eventually Dokes being named at the end of this being the Bay Harbor Butcher, because his Dexter's sponsor at that time went off and killed Dokes by exploding the cabin that Dokes was in to have kind of Dexter being free in the clear. But then Dexter went off to go and get his sponsor to go and kill her, so that way, like, nobody knows that Dexter is to be this murderer, and Dexter could not trust this girl because it seemed more and more like she was starting to see some murderous tendencies, and so Dexter wanted to nip that in the butt, so to speak. So other than that, yeah, so Angela's kind of looking into this case, but we'll see within the next episode how eventually that is to be uncovered, covered, and whatever. Because eventually that'll probably be the thing that they cover in the next episode I'm hoping fairly quickly. So we'll see. We'll see how that all goes out. I'm hoping Angela doesn't have to be killed here, or I'm hoping that they can like figure out a way to just work this out, or probably Angela is kind of digging too much into nothing. I would hope, but I think she'll always still have this suspicion about Dexter. So with that said, I am going to get out of here. But yeah, but Angela was so consumed with the whole Iris case that she had no clue about what was going on with Logan. And so maybe now, like, Angela is going to go on and just kind of see how all of her other, how all of her other, like, associates are doing on their cases. So that way she can kind of go on and want to look further into things. Because I think eventually she's going to go on and look further into Dexter, and that'll lead into a number of things. So, with that said, maybe also Angela will go on and reconnect with some Miami people, like through a phone, and just kind of like see about Dexter and so on and so forth. So, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.